There is no headscarf in the Quran. Written by Firas al-Munir. The goal of this book is to prove that the Holy Quran never required women to cover their heads, as the traditional jurists had fabricated. Since the Quran forbids a believer to take anything other than the Quran as a religious source, as I proved in another book, the Quran forbids considering the Prophet's behavior as legislation. What are the body parts that a believing woman should cover? This question has been dealt with in more than one surah of the Quran. Sometimes you find a surah in which the body parts of a woman preferred to be covered, and sometimes only what must be covered. Let us start with Surah An-Nur. We brought down and imposed this surah. Moreover, we brought down in it miraculous verses, with the aim that you may meditate. 1. Surah An-Nur. The phrase "we brought down" came in the plural form, because it is the saying of the Supreme Heavenly Advisory Council, which among its specializations are matters related to the universe's physical laws. From this aspect, it represents the highest possible capabilities of human beings when they reach someday the highest levels of scientific development. According to the Quranic jargon, bringing down the thing originally belonging to metaphysics makes it perceptible. Applying that to the context of these verses tells us that when a person studies the results of implementing the Quranic sexual commandments, he can discover the suitability of these commandments to the nature of sexual reality, provided that the means are scientifically advanced enough. That is what I explained in detail earlier on YouTube. Bringing down is not aimed at a specific group, as appears in the following verse. We brought down iron, which gives people great strength and benefits. 25. Surah Al-Hadid. The Supreme Consultative Council has allowed iron to exist on earth in its perceived physical form, and not just as an energy we do not see, so that people can discover and harness this metal. Since bringing the iron down does not target a particular group, the verb here remains undirected. For the same reason, the phrase, "we brought down this surah," was mentioned in the first verse of Surah An-Nur to describe the surah in general. That means that everyone will understand this surah's meaning, whether they are believers or disbelievers. However, we meet in the following verse of the same surah with the same verb, directed as follows. We brought to you down, undoubted verses. 34. Surah An-Nur. The verb came this time specifically to the believers, since all the verses between the first verse and this verse are commandments directed at the community of believers, because only those who believe that these verses come from their Lord will implement them. Then came the following verse. We brought down undoubted verses. 46. Again, the verb here is not directed, because the verses before are free of commandments and talk about the physical laws of the universe, which are not directed to a specific group of people. It is worth noting that the adjective undoubted and the adjective miraculous, which were mentioned in the previous verses, are both in the Arabic language derived from one linguistic root, which is clarity, except that the first consists of 6 letters and the second of 5. In the language of the Quran, clarity in the first adjective means clarity of reality, while in the second, clarity of source. The clarity of reality in the first adjective confirmed that the attribute is genuine 100%. That is, it is not a metaphor or a relative meaning. That is what I call the saturated adjective, such as, Moses said, O Pharaoh, I am a messenger from the Lord of the worlds. So he threw his staff, and then it was an undoubted snake. 104, 107. Surah Al-Araf. Everyone who saw this snake did not doubt that it was a real snake 100%. On the other hand, does this snake represent a miracle? And therefore Moses is a messenger in contact with the celestial realm. That was the second adjective's task that classified the snake's miracle among the 9 miracles of Moses. We gave Moses 9 miraculous signs. 101. Surah Al-Isra. The clarity of the source in the second adjective means the clarity of belonging to the world of heavens, therefore representing the divine miracle. For the same reason, The previous verses in Surah An-Nur are described as indisputable because we can understand their meaning with 100% certainty when we let the Quran explain itself, as we do in this book, with this precise methodology. The Quran, in principle, strongly opposes the imposition of religious commandments on people by force. For example, the state does not have the right to compel citizens to pray, fast, or do anything similar. Therefore, Quran did not consider prayer or fasting as an obligation. However, specific subjects represent religious commandments. Thus, whoever adheres to them is supposed to seek God's satisfaction in the hereafter. At the same time, if he violates them, his punishment will be in the hereafter and by the state. For example, the Islamic court distributes the inheritance according to Quranic laws when the deceased leaves no will. Therefore, the Quran called the right of inheritance an obligation from God. If he has siblings, then his mother gets 1/6, an obligation from God. 11 Surah An-Nisa. The Quran also defines the dowry as an obligation because a man promises a woman that he will hand it over to her as a gift upon marriage. However, if he does not keep his promise, the woman can then file a complaint in court. If you divorce them before foreplay and after you have imposed an obligation on yourselves in their favor. 237 Surah Al-Baqarah. For the same reason, the word imposed is mentioned in the first verse of Surah An-Nur because the commandments mentioned in this surah are to be imposed on people by the state. It is unreasonable to allow a person to walk down the street completely naked under the gaze of children. Therefore, after the first verse of this surah, the surah immediately begins with judicial rulings.
The adulteress, and who has sexual intercourse with her, flog each of them 100 lashes. 2 Surah An-Nur. The words impose and obligation are derived from the same linguistic root in Arabic.
If we turn to the 30th verse, we find that the speech has changed to a different form, which began with the word tell. Tell the believers to lower from their visual perception and protect their genital organs. 30 Surah An-Nur. It is not enough to propose a law that penalizes looking at those who do not wish to be seen when they are in an embarrassing situation. There must also be moral education. That is why the Quran always addresses the word tell to the Messenger Muhammad, to make him understand that these commandments are not enough for you, to treat them as if you were a mere informant, so you say them to people once. However, it would be helpful if you also treated them as educators and preachers. Therefore, every preacher should reiterate these commands to believers. As for the phrase, tell the believers to lower from their visual perception, the act of lowering here will be mentioned with the voice in 2 cases. Make your walk purposeful and lower from your voice. 19 Surah Luqman. Here, the act of lowering is accompanied by the preposition from. Those who lower their voices in the presence of the Messenger of God. 3 Surah Al-Hujurat. While here, the act of lowering is not accompanied by the preposition from, because the first verse talks about your behavior in life in general, as there is one case in which you should not raise your voice, when raising your voice is harmful to people. For example, raising your voice in some situations indicates arrogance, as some bullies do when they raise their voices, to show that they are strong and frightened people. Raising the voice in such situations was forbidden by the first verse, and therefore the verse before it said, Allah does not like every proud arrogant. 18 Surah Luqman. In other cases, raising your voice may be helpful to people, such as yelling to warn parents that their child is about to fall. The preposition from is not mentioned when the believers gather around the messenger in the second verse, because it is not correct that a believer raises his voice in the messenger's presence, regardless of whether it was an expression of arrogance or even for a helpful purpose. Here, politeness is more important than getting some benefits. In the Quranic jargon, the preposition from makes the meaning of the lowering moral, while without it, the lowering is physiological. Since the command to lower one's visual perception comes with the preposition from, it means not to look at people in a state they do not like to be seen. For example, if you are walking down the street, it is not correct to stop at a house and observe its inhabitants. Therefore, the 3 verses that preceded this command spoke of the rules of behavior within the neighborhood. Some of those who did not meditate on the Quran explained the lowering from the visual perception by saying, the believer must lower the space between his 2 eyelids a little when he sees a woman revealing forbidden parts of her body while walking in the street. This interpretation is wrong because the previous verse was not about vision, but visual perception. The Quran clearly distinguishes between the eye and visual perception in many verses, including, we have made hell a suitable place for many human beings and alien beings. They have eyes by which they do not perceive visually. 179. Surah Al-A'raf. To achieve visual perception, humans need the eyes as a medium. However, some have 2 eyes and need to realize what they should perceive through them. They could have used the means to achieve a better result. They see but need to realize what they see to reach the truth. Saying for the verse that spoke about lowering from the voice, because it did not say lower from your mouth, but rather it spoke of the result, which is the voice, not the means. The verse warns you that social custom classifies directing your look at people as evil. That is the only thing forbidden in the Quran concerning looking. However, if someone is not bothered by looking at him, then you are not mistaken. Even if you look at the forbidden parts of her body, as long as she intentionally exposes herself, she will be punished in the hereafter, not you. If we continue reading the 30th verse, we find that it says, they should protect their genital organs. 30. Surah An-Nur.
Since the speech before and after this sentence is related to the gaze, it means that men must keep their private parts from the gaze, namely the penis, scrotum, and anus. These parts must be protected entirely, based on the types of protections of the genitals, explained in my book The Truth of Prayer in the Quran. You are not even allowed to wear tight clothes that describe the outline of the penis and the scrotum. As for the verse that came after this verse, it is specific to women. And tell the believing women to lower from their visual perception and protect their genital organs. 31. Surah An-Nur. Women here also should not violate people's privacy with inappropriate looks. Furthermore, it is not correct for them to wear tight clothing that shows the details of their genital organ, namely the vulva. However, the verse made the matter more detailed about them through the phrase, and not expose their valuables, which some interpreted as saying that women should hide their jewelry from the eyes. Others claimed that she had to hide the parts of her body where she wore this jewelry.
The truth is that both of these interpretations are wrong, because jewelry, such as necklaces, rings, bracelets, and alike, is what the Quran calls jewelry, not valuables. It is He who has made the sea suitable for you, to eat fresh meat, and bring out jewelry that you wear. 14. Surah An-Nahl. Of what they burn in the fire to obtain jewelry. 17. Surah Al-Ra'd. The 2 seas are not of one nature, and you bring out jewelry that you wear. 12. Surah Fatir. Therefore, whoever is brought up among jewelry is not proficient in the art of dialogue. 18. Surah Al-Zukhruf. In the Quranic jargon, valuables are one thing and jewelry is another. In order to understand the valuables, we must first understand the pockets, which are mentioned in the same verse as follows. And let them cover their pockets with their clothes. This phrase indicates that covering the valuables is to cover the pockets. The phrase, and not expose their valuables, is mentioned twice in this verse. After the first was the permission to cover women's valuables, even in tight clothes. After the second were people who were allowed to see these valuables without clothes. The pockets in Arabic have multiple meanings, but they all converge on one meaning at the end, including the pocket of the pants and everything that represents a flatness between two prominent things. Moreover, in the Dictionary of Language Standards, analyzing in depth all the linguistic roots from which the word pocket is likely to be derived, indicates that they are related to digging and holes, or collecting and containing. So what can contain something must be more like a hole or a void, so there is room for something else. Therefore, all meanings ultimately relate to the hole, or the space between two things. Even in the Quranic jargon, we find the same meaning in the following verses. The Thamuds, who dug the rocks in the valley to carve it. 9. Surah Al-Fatir. One of them said, Do not kill Yusuf, and throw him into the pit depths. 10. Surah Yusuf. Put your hand in your pocket. 12. Surah An-Naml. Pass your hand through your pocket. 32. Surah Al-Qasas.
The pocket here, if it were not a hole like all the pockets of clothes, he would not have been able to insert his hand into it, for the insertion is between two prominent things. Therefore, the woman's valuables are the space between the breasts and between the buttocks, extending to the entire vulva. Therefore, the parts to be covered are the buttocks, the vulva, the space between them, and the breasts. The areas that are flat and do not contain two prominent parts, such as the upper chest or lower back, do not belong to the valuables, therefore, covering them is unnecessary. According to the Quranic jargon, the first element mentioned in a list is the basis for understanding the rest of the elements, therefore, the rest of the woman's cavities, such as the armpit, ear, nose, mouth, and the like, are not intended by the decree of covering. Because the vulva is the first part of a woman mentioned in this verse, that is a sexual organ, this indicates that any hollow is not classed with her valuables, unless it is a sexual organ. Furthermore, the vulva is also mentioned at the end of this verse, to confirm that it is all about sexual organs exclusively. The following verses will make the meaning of valuables clearer.
First, the valuables are unique, therefore, attract attention. We have made constellations in the sky, and made them valuable to the onlookers. 16. Surah Al-Hijr. The valuables here attract the beholder because of their distinction from what surrounds them. Therefore, a woman's hollowness is not classified as valuable, only that which is unique and surrounded by something bulging and attractive. Second, to be distinguished from what is flat. We have made what is on the earth's valuables, and we will make it flat like the desert. 7. 8. Surah Al-Kahf. Any object above the earth's surface is considered one of the earth's valuables. However, when that day comes, the earth's surface will become flat and look like a desert, with no vegetation or life source. Therefore, since the forearm, humerus, leg, and other parts are flat and featureless organs, they are not classified as valuables. Third, to be a symbol of a seductive force, our Lord. You gave Pharaoh and his retinue, who might lead people astray from your path, valuables and money in the life of this world. 88. Surah Yunus. The valuables that Pharaoh owned differed from money, so conjunction separated them. Pharaoh used these valuables to mislead people from the path of their Lord, relying on the severity of their seduction and influence. They are similar to the sexual organs of a man or a woman, which have a significant impact when directed to corrupt a society. He said, Your appointment is the day of valuables, and the people should be gathered in the morning. So Pharaoh went away, gathering his means to dazzle, and then he came. Collect your means to dazzle. Then line up yourselves horizontally. Those who strive for superiority have succeeded today. 59, 60, and 64. Surah Taha. Pharaoh called that day the day of valuables, because he would gather all his means of optical illusion, which were his valuables, to show his superiority to people. Consider the valuables how special they are, and are not found in all people. Therefore, it is not the leg in a woman that distinguishes her from a man, but rather her private parts, which the Quran calls valuables, that do that. Did he not know that, centuries before his birth, God had destroyed the one who had more means of warfare and more soldiers than him? So he went out to his people with his valuables. Those who desire the life of this world said, "Oh, would we have the like of what Quran was given." 78, 79 Surah Al-Qasas. Quran's valuables were a lot of weapons and soldiers. Imagine the psychological state of someone who sees Quran's valuables. Naturally, he would have wished to get what Quran had, because the valuables are fantastic. A woman's hair cannot be called valuable, because when a man sees it, he is not sexually aroused, no matter how beautiful it is. Instead, a woman's valuables are like Quran's valuables, in that they are how she influences whom she chooses. Those who demand a woman to cover her hair, because it is beautiful, have not studied the Quran, which distinguishes between beauty and valuables in its jargon. A woman's hair, face, etc. is beautiful. Moreover, each of the birds, trees, and everything in this life has its own beauty, but the Quran forbids a woman to show her valuables, not beauty. Beauty is mentioned in the Quran as follows. He has created the cattle. Their beauty makes you happy when they rest, and when you release them. Moreover, horses, mules, and donkeys to ride, and valuables. 5, 6, and 8, Surah An-Nahl. He considered that the appearance of the cattle, as they roam the pastures, is an appearance of beauty. He mentioned the valuables immediately after that, so you understand that valuables are one thing and beauty is another. Since a woman's valuables are one of her most prominent means of success, in the world of love, the word valuables is also associated with devotion in verse. O you descendants of Adam, take your valuables at every devotion event. 31. Surah Al-A'raf. I explained in my book, The Truth of Prayer in the Quran, that devotion has multiple meanings, including, first, devotion during prayer. Second, a devotion that follows the path of the angel's work in this universe, to understand its laws, so that we can accomplish scientific inventions, for example. Therefore, the verse asks people to arm themselves with the capabilities that suit each situation. It advises them to have the appropriate preparations for entering the mosque for the congregational prayer and appropriate equipment for entering scientific laboratories to study and discover. Valuables, then, are means suited to the particular goal desired. To further confirm those mentioned above, the Quran correlated the valuables with typicality, not with beauty. Whoever was deceived into thinking his misdeed was valuable saw it as typical. 8. Surah Fatir. The overall result of the valuables illusion was the typicality illusion. It is not permissible for you to have women from now on, nor to replace them with wives, even if you like their typicality. 52. Surah Al-Ahzab. Here is the prohibition of the Prophet from a future marriage, even if he met women whom he admired. The verse did not mention their beauty, because what usually attracts a man to a woman is her typicality more than her beauty. If a woman has a beautiful face, for example, but she has fundamental defects in her female parts, which the Quran calls valuables, this will likely be a reason to reduce the number of men who will think of marrying her. Their typicality means that their valuables are free of defects. That is, even if the Prophet met a woman who wore decent clothes, but her clothes described some details of her chest, for example, which suited the taste of the Prophet, The verse nevertheless bans him from marrying this woman. He may meet a unique woman with a beauty he has never seen before, and she attracts him deeply. How can he refrain from a future benefit or pleasure that he does not know, unless he was not the writer of the taboos of this scripture and was commanded to refrain from them, exactly as we are commanded? For this reason, the women of paradise were described as typical, not beautiful. They are typical women with excellent attributes. 70. Shura Rahman. Beauty is more present in this life than typicality. Even the bird is beautiful, and no jurist forbade people to look at the bird. We stay at verse 31 to continue reciting it. They should not expose their valuables, except what is easily perceived. The word perceived in the Quran has multiple meanings, but each has its style of expression. The intended meaning in this verse came in the same manner in the following verses. Do not approach immorality, regardless of whether it is easy to perceive or difficult. 151. Surah Al-An'am. Say, My Lord has forbidden immorality, regardless of whether it is easy to perceive or difficult. 33. Surah Al-A'raf. Thus, the meaning of the verse, they should not expose their valuables, except what is easily perceived, is that the female organs mentioned must be covered with clothes. However, it would not be a problem if the clothes were so tight that they describe the size or shape of these organs. The following verse also supports the above. They know what is easy to perceive from the life of this world. Did they not reflect on themselves? Did they not travel and see the end of those before them? 7-9. Surah Ar-Rum. Most people only know what is easy to perceive from this life because they did not think and did not walk the earth to study and discover what is difficult to perceive, which is the reality of this life. The one who looks at the woman wearing these clothes knows what is easy to perceive from her parts, enabling him to get an idea of what is difficult to perceive, which is the organs themselves without clothes. He thus has only an idea of her organs behind the clothes, through the outer side of the clothes. However, his perception does not have to be accurate, as perhaps he married this woman after that, and discovered that her body was not as he imagined.
For example, he cannot see the skin even through tight clothes. As for the vulva, it is not correct for the beholder to perceive any information about it, so it is not permissible to cover it with tight clothing. Even males, who are permitted to see a woman's valuables without clothes, are not allowed to see her vulva. Only her partner has the right to see her vulva, whether they are married or living a love story according to Islamic conditions. When the Quran spoke of indirect protection of the private parts, which is to protect oneself from sexual arousal, that leads to the use of the private parts for sexual intercourse, it specifically excluded the partners, as follows. Those who are protective for the sarke of their private parts, except for their spouses or concubines. 5-6 Surah Al-Mu'minun. I have proven in other books with ample evidence that the preposition for always gives an indirect meaning in the Quran. As for here, when the verse spoke of direct protection of the vulva from looking, it did not exclude anyone. The males mentioned in the verse, who are allowed to see a woman's valuables, are usually mistranslated from Arabic, especially the first male. He is translated as her husband. While, in fact, according to the Quranic jargon, he is the one who had sexual intercourse with his wife, and then stopped that for some reason for a long time, whether it is by agreement between them or not. He is not her husband in the traditional sense, so the Quran gave him a different title.
If we move to the end of the same verse, we find the phrase, they should not kick, so that their valuables which they hide will be perceived. The kicking in the Quran always consists of one movement, so the phrase, they should not kick, means that a woman is prohibited from making even one movement, if her goal is to reveal part of her hidden valuables. Kicking here is not necessarily kicking the ground, because the verse did not say, they should not kick the ground. And therefore, it is any movement, even in the air.
Since the hidden valuable thing is correlated here with the movement of the legs, is the vulva for many reasons, including: first, he mentioned the vulva at the beginning and end of the topic to let you understand that all valuables are sexual organs, so that no one would say that the nostril, for example, is one of the pockets that must be covered. On the other hand, repeating the mention of the vulva is considered an emphasis on its specification's uniqueness. That is, it is not enough for the vulva to be hidden entirely if the woman is still, but even while moving her legs. Second, the protection of the vulva mentioned in verse is its concealment. As for the rest of the valuables, it was allowed to perceive something from them easily, so they are not described as hidden. Third, the prohibition here is of perceiving this part of the valuables, not seeing it. Since the breasts and buttocks can be perceived, what is the banned thing to perceive? Only the vulva remains. Therefore, while she moves her leg, it is incorrect that the clothes tighten around a part of her vulva, or that this part be exposed. The breasts cannot be seen because they are covered with a garment, but it is possible to know the shape and size, because the Quran does not require that they be completely hidden. Since the verses consider covering the buttocks the same as covering the breasts, the part that is forbidden to be covered with tight clothes will be the vulva, which means that it was hidden before moving the leg. The phrase "so that their valuables which they hide will be perceived" means that a woman is legally held accountable only if she deliberately tightens the clothes around the vulva. Kicking here means the woman makes intentional movements that lead to the garment covering the vulva becoming tight, such as doing so during exercise. Since the woman has the right to practice sport, even in front of men, she should cover her breasts and buttocks adequately, and insist on strict coverage of the vulva, so that the garment is not tight.
On the other hand, the movements of the arms are not prohibited, even if they let the garment be tight around the breast. Conclusion. First, protection. It is to completely hide the genital organ, so as not to give any information to the person watching, whether it is a male or female organ. Second, perception. The woman must cover the breasts, sulcus intermammarius, buttocks, and gluteal cleft entirely, even if the clothes are tight. As for the upper chest and upper buttocks, if they are flat and have no sulcus intermammarius or gluteal cleft, there is no need to be covered. As for the remaining parts of the body, it is permissible to expose them without clothes, in front of people. Suppose a woman has not found clothing covering precisely those parts. In this case, she will have to take more precautions by covering them more, to ensure that they are not exposed during a movement, for example. Because the verse here talks about the minimum, it is not allowed, not 1 millimeter less than this limit. However, if we go beyond talking about the minimum, to the maximum that the Quran prefers for women, then we will study the following verse. O Prophet, tell your wives, your daughters and the believers' women, to put the parts of their outer garments close together, so they cover more. It is the least that can be done, so that they will be known and not be offended. 59. Surah Al-Ahzab. The speech here is directed to Muhammad as a prophet, not a messenger. It means that whoever does not take this advice is not threatened with punishment in the hereafter. I explained that in detail in my book. The Quran forbids considering the prophet's behavior as legislation. Moreover, the verses that mention the purpose of the commands are very few in general, and this verse is one of them, whose purpose is, so that they will be known and not be offended. That is, the woman is not obliged to wear the dress mentioned in this verse specifically, but she can achieve the mentioned purpose with any clothing, as long as it follows the traditions of her society. Since the Quran is suitable for every time and place, the verses whose details do not suit all times and places have been formulated to let you achieve their purposes in the way you see fit. The last sentence of the verse means that the woman at the time of the Prophet Muhammad wore this outer garment so that she could be known and not be offended by people. Knowing her does not mean knowing her name, but to which social class she belongs. The following verses confirm that meaning. The prostration leaves a trace on their faces, clear on their appearance. 29. Surah Al-Fatiha. Criminals are known by appearance. 41. Surah Ar-Rahman. As you see, the act of knowing correlates to appearance, such as something on the face. That means knowledge is through face, clothing, or the like. The beholder will know whether she belongs to the class of decent women, who wear clothes that follow the traditions of society, or does she belong to the lower class of women, who wear only the minimum legal dress mentioned in Surah An-Nur. For those whose clothes match only the minimum, it is natural for some societies not to consider them of the upper class. Although the minimum does not violate Islamic law, the social view is different. A decent woman will not hear people talk about her or her actions so that she will not be offended. The Quran encouraged women to dress in what follows their society's traditions. However, if women violated them, they would not be punished in the afterlife, since they wore at least the minimum mentioned in Surah An-Nur. Under this video, you will find links to access the book in over 100 languages.